Hey, it's Charlie Craven from Fly Fisherman Magazine, and today I'm going to tie you AK Best's Melon Quill. This is in the April-May edition of the magazine. This is a little bit different twist on what would normally be a traditional Catskill style dry, but with lots of little twists and tricks that AK was famous for. Check it out, see what you think. Hey, it's Charlie with Fly Fisherman Magazine, and today I'm going to tie for you a fly from sort of the old days, or at least my old days, from Archie Best. Archie passed away in October, and was one of, really Colorado's definitely most famous fly tyers. Really a lot of cool stuff that he developed over the years, and an interesting way to go about things in sort of a whole different way. While his patterns are very traditional, he did definitely look at things in a little bit different way and tried to match things to the actual bug rather than artificial fly proportions and colors and so forth. And that's one of the things I always liked about him. So when we came up with the idea of doing this article and video, the Melon Quill, which is a signature pattern of Arch's, immediately came to mind. So I'm going to twist one up for you as best I can do in the Archie Best theme, AK Best theme. And I've got in my vise, I've already changed the hook because I'm not tying this on a Mustad 94-840, which is what he tied a lot of his stuff on. In my vise, I've got a Tiemco 100 SP. And I'm going to use some Magpie material, 72 Denier thread in deep yellow. But I'm going to start this thread at about 75%. And I'm going to wrap all the way back to the bend. And when I get there, I'm going to use some Spade hackles for the tail. So I've got, in the case of this Melon Quill is sort of the PMD on the Frying Pan River that hatches out of the basalt rocks. So they are kind of an orangish, pinkish cast to their body rather than straight yellow. And interestingly enough, PMDs that come out further downstream or upstream, those come out more yellow, but the ones in the middle come out with this sort of orange cast. So we're going to use ginger hackle on this, and it's going to have a two-color quill body. But the tail, per Archie's description, is a dark dun colored spade hackle. So one thing I've always noticed about Archie's flies is he uses a fairly heavy clump of spade hackles for the tail. So I'm going to do that same thing, and maybe just a slight bit longer than a shank length. And I'm going to tie that in at the bend here, and I kind of give it an eyeball measurement, just a little bit longer than a shank. And then I'm going to come forward over those butt ends. And in this case, they end right at my 70% point, so I don't need to trim them off. But if they were any longer than that, I would trim those off up here. And then I'm going to bring the thread right up to the hook eye and back again to about the 80% point, so just in front of that tie-off. One thing that is very trademark on Archie's flies is the tails are sort of canted, elevated. You can see I just stroke that tail up a little bit so it splays out just a tiny bit, and that is to imitate the splayed tail of the natural. Now for the wings, Archie was quite famous for using what are called winger necks, which are harder to get these days. They're not non-existent, but they're harder to get. And what they originally were pullets, which is a desexed male chicken. And they have really big round tips. So a really nice match for a mayfly wing silhouette. So what I've got here, and you could use regular hen feathers for this, you just want to look for something that's got pretty rounded tips to it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to even these up and oppose them so they're curving away from each other. Let me get them down here where I can see them and follow along. And then I'm going to trim them. I'm going to get my measurement before I trim them. Just a little longer than a shank length. I usually shoot for a hook length, so you can see I'm from the back edge of the hook eye right to the outside of the bend of the hook. And then I'll trim those off at that point, like so. So now I've got these pre-measured in my fingertips. And the way I've always done these wings is I'll hold them in my material, or this is actually my thread hand, my hand that I usually wrap the thread with. In my case, it's my left. And I'm going to do a reverse pinch wrap. So I'm going to come up and pinch the thread in my fingers and snap it down. Get a couple turns on that before I let go. And then I can kind of check my length. And I like that length. They're a little tall, which is right along the lines of Arch. I'm going to anchor those buttons down, then I'm going to sweep these back and build just a little thread dam. It doesn't take much of a thread dam in front of these to stand them up. And then I could sort of preen the wings into position like so. It might be a little taller than I love. Oh, I think we're all right. Just while I have you, I'll show you a good tidbit on both of these things. As far as the measurements go, you can take another hook of the same size and style that you're tying on and measure it against the hook. So that tail is a little longer than a shank length, and these wings are probably going to be a little longer than a shank length as well. They are. But we're going to go with it. We'd like to say Arch tied his wings a little tall, and I'm going to stick with that. Now, one thing that Archie does that is different than what I would typically do is he will come through, and make an X-wrap in between these wings to splay these out a little bit. I find that is harder to do than is really, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on that. But staying true to the program, we'll get those wings spread out just a little bit more. Let me get another turn on here. You can kind of get an idea. They're spread out a little wider than usual. And then I'm going to bump the thread back to just behind the wings. Now we get to the cool part of this fly, and a lot of Archie's flies, is the quill body. So what I've got here is one cream and one pink stripped and dyed Rooster Hackle quill, one of each. And on my cream colored one, I want it to be about twice the diameter of the pink one. So you just kind of have to line the tips up to where you get them with a little variation in the diameter. You don't want two that are the same diameter. And I'm going to tie these in along my near side of the hook, and I'm going to wrap back over them all the way to the bend. And incidentally, I have been soaking those in warm water for about a half hour. Once they're soaked, they wrap much more easily, and they won't crack. If you don't soak them, the likelihood of them cracking is pretty darn good. So you want to soak those ahead of time. Now, to build this body, what I want to do here is I'm going to leave my thread hanging at the front. Is I'm going to wrap both these quills at the same time. And this is sort of, reminiscent of a jujube. Is I want to butt these wraps right together, and you can see I can kind of use my fingernail to bump these together. And the natural taper of the quill is going to build that taper to the body, and you can see it's really nicely variegated, very realistic. I'm going to tie that quill off. One other thing I've noted from soaking the quills is they get a little softer, so when you go to tie off the thick butt into the quill, it's a much easier tie off if it's soaked and a little bit more pliable. So I'll trim those two quills out. Then I want to smooth that base off just a bit. You've got kind of a big clump there. And then I'll bring the thread back up to the hook eye and then just back to the front edge of the wings. Now this next little step is going to be another little trick that Archie incorporated that was different from what everybody else was doing, is he would tie his feather in just in front of the wings. So I'm going to tie this in by bare stem. I've prepped that feather like so. So I'm tied in right in front of the wings. And I'm going to take my first turn of hackle behind the wings here. This one's going to want to turn, so I've got to reposition him just a bit. There we go. So I'm going to make this first turn. This one really wants to twist. And occasionally you'll encounter that. I'm just going to come up that quill a little bit. Get this to cooperate. Here we go. So now I go from the front of the wings to the first turn is right behind the wing. So I'm going to make this first turn right at the back edge of the wing, another turn right to the front edge of the body. So I've made 3 turns in a row working back toward the front edge of the body. And Archie's idea was to splay the hackle, to get it to splay out front and back, toward the eye and toward the bend, like a real mayfly's legs. So to that end, he would take another turn sort of diagonal through that, which sort of dishevels the hackle. And when I first started seeing these flies, I thought they were poorly tied. And then when I understood what he was doing, it made a lot more sense. I'm going to put the next turn right in front of the wings, next turn right in front of that, and another turn, and then you could take another turn through that to splay that hackle out a bit. And you can see how that'll splay sort of toward the front and the back of the hook to splay that hackle a bit. Hold on to my thread here and give you sort of a full 360 view of that. But a pretty interesting technique to build a hackle collar that is not quite so conical, I guess would be the word for it. And while it may at first seem odd, it actually is a much better representation of a mayfly's legs. We'll throw a little whip finish in there, and we'll trim that thread out of there. And I'm pretty happy with that one. I'm going to splay that tail up a bit. And that is my version of the AK Best Melon Quill. Not a bad idea to smear a little drop of thinned head cement over the quill body. Might throw a drop on the head just while you're at it, but all sorts of different variations on the theme. The stripped and dyed quills are really fun to tie with. You could obviously do them with parachutes or any variety. You know, when I first saw them in one of I think it was his AK's Flybox book, he had a caddis larva tied from a quill, and I could tell you that there was nothing that looked more like a caddis larva than that fly to me at the time. Pretty creative guy, really a nice old guy. I met him years and years and years ago for the first time. Back when I was working in a fly shop in Boulder, and every time I met him, every time I saw him since that day, he always remembered my name and was the perfect gentleman. So this is sort of my tribute to Arch. I hope you're catching some fish on some dry flies. I know that's what you liked. You guys, thanks for watching. I'm Charlie with Fly Fisherman Magazine. Take care.